I got a review for you here on the channel today. We're going to be taking a look at the Bohning Spin Fletcher. It looks like it's a fletching jig for spin wings. So I'm going to unbox it, show it to you up close. I'm really hoping that this thing speeds up the process of fletching mylar style vanes or spin wings, and it puts them on much more accurately. So like I said there in the intro, I've got a Bohning Spin Fletcher, and it appears that it may be only for right-handed vanes, at least the one that is available at Lancaster Archery Supply, and I have links down in the description below for this actual product in case you're interested in this. Genuinely would help this channel out if you click that link before you shop there. I'm just really curious to see if using this thing will speed up the fletching process of a mylar style or spin wing type vane. And, you know, putting them on, you put them on by hand with the exception of one other product that I'm aware of that's similar to this. And you can make mistakes when putting them on by hand. So I'm excited to see a jig that should be able to be used to consistently place these things on the arrow, at least much more consistently than I can by hand, at least in my opinion. You know, obviously your mileage will vary there because if you spend a lot of time and pay a lot of attention to how you're putting on your spin wings, and you put a lot of them on, you can get really good and really consistent with them. But that's like one of the biggest downfalls in my opinion, is that there hasn't really been a jig available to put them on consistently in a mechanical way. Now there is a jig out there that is called the Wing Thing. I believe it's made in Australia, or at least was invented in Australia. And I've had a lot of people ask me to check it out and try it out. However, there's not really a place in the US that you can grab it. At least not a supplier in the US, and I saw this thing pop up at Lancaster as one of their new products. And so out of curiosity, like I said, I wanted to order it. And then, of course, I'm going to do a review for you all to check it out, because if I can find something that makes fletching spin wings easier, I'm definitely going to give you a thumbs up to grab it. So what we'll do in the video is I'm going to reposition the camera over the bench, and then we'll unbox this thing, take a close-up look at it, and fletch up a few arrows and see how consistently we can get spin wings put on my X10s. We'll try a couple other fatter arrows as well, because this thing is available up to a 2 3/4 inch spin wing or mylar style vane, and it works with shafts as small as 0.177 inches and as thick as 0.275. So as small as 4.5 mil and as thick as 7 mil. Let's look at this thing unboxed here. Like I said, this is called the Spin Fletcher, and it says for right-handed vanes here, as you can see. Also says it down here at the bottom. Doesn't say that at the Lancaster website, but I'm assuming that this thing is for right-handed vanes only. They may have a left-handed version, I'm not entirely sure. So you may want to make sure you check that out in case you're a left-handed shooter before you grab one of these things. At least make sure you get the left-handed version if there is indeed two different versions. So let's look at this thing here first. Yeah, see, they are marked R, so that means that these are probably for the right, and there is no left. Maybe you can buy left arms only to swap in. I'm not entirely sure, but it is 3D printed, as you can see, you know, because of the layer lines, right? The whole entire thing is actually 3D printed from the clamps all the way down to this piece here, with the exception of the O-rings, which are just regular standard O-rings according to what I'm seeing. So before we tear into this thing, let's check out the manual. Just some basic stuff here. Comes with a carrying case, obviously. Slide in the arrow, position and install the vanes in seconds. Yeah, there's no knock receiver at all, so it looks like the arrow just slides in and this thing squeezes on a arrow. So you got to pay attention to the depth that you put this thing on, and then looks like you fletch it from this side here. The arrow sticks up this way, so that's interesting. And then goes up to 2 3/4 inch or 70 millimeter vanes, and as thin as 4.5 mil, OD as big as 7 millimeter. It says to use it with the Bohning tape, which we will today because I've got a bunch of that. Oh, interesting. You point it that way. Cool. Cool, so you put the tape on after you put the vane in place. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how easy these instructions are to follow. So it looks like everything stays together. None of this comes apart. And it looks like the vane just slides in that little hole, that gap in there. And these little notches, you're supposed to use the notches to consistently position the vane, so you'll use those as a reference. So you might want to make like a mark on the edge with a Sharpie saying like, this is the one that I always put my vane to. yeah, it's just a standard O-ring that's going to hold this thing all together. I would assume all three pieces probably separate, but there's looks like some pins inside of here that keep everything together, keep the arms in place. Yeah, I'd be interested to know how long this thing is going to last with it being 3D printed. I don't know what it's printed out of, so I'd be very, very careful leaving this thing in a hot car just in case this thing is printed with PLA. Doesn't feel like PLA, but it's really possible. I would hope it's at least PETG, because PLA, especially in the Florida heat, will warp and completely lose its structural shape and its dimensional accuracy. So I'm hoping that that's not the case here. So if you do have one, just make sure you're not leaving it in a super hot environment like inside your car. So I'll actually fletch up a couple of different sizes. So I've got an X10 here, maximum recurve RZ, and an RX7. So we'll see. I don't know how big each are and what the limit is, but we're going to find out here today. Get an idea. They say to slide the end in this direction. So it looks like X10s do work because it is held in firmly. Alright, so the good thing I got a brand new thing of boning tape. This is going to make things really nice. So let's see here. We'll set on a flat surface with two arms down. I see. So you're supposed to use the back of this as your flat reference for the one that's going to then come down. Now I just want to make sure I'm orienting it in the correct direction. So it can definitely be put in too far. Insert a vane into the retracted arm. The front of the vane should face the base segment. So it looks like you're supposed to put the vane flush with this piece here, this line. So I put it in way too far. Just trying to position it correctly. So I'm looking to put where the vane goes and crosses the second notch from this side here, the far back position, which I highly advise using the boning tape for spin wing fletching. I have a video that I created how to mass set up your actual tape, so that, or your vanes rather, so you can set up a lot of vanes ready to go with tape, and then it actually speeds up your fletching process dramatically. And I will include that link down in the description below as well as up at the top there for you to check out just in case you want to, because they are very, very, actually I think it might be at the top over there, but it is very, very helpful and speeds up the process and makes fletching spin wings a little bit more pleasant. So it doesn't hold very firmly in the clamp, so the vane just popped right out. And now I'm kind of committed because I'm stuck, the vane's stuck partially on this tape. I think I would be loading the vane with the tape on it already into the clamp instead of loading the vane first and then putting the tape on it, because you kind of need to be fairly precise with the tape. And it's very difficult when it's moving around to actually do it that way. So I think putting it on first and then sliding it in place, and then good luck getting the backing. Yeah, this is... Alright, well, I guess I'm just going to peel it off out here. And this is why I glue on vanes, ladies and gentlemen. This is why I don't use spin wings anymore. I'm going to push it all the way in against the flat spot where the tape is seeing, and see if the tape is all the way flush against the ridged edge. And see, it doesn't show that. It doesn't really show up close where this should be, if it's all the way flush with this line. I don't think it should be because of this little smile here that's cut into it for your, I'm assuming your finger placement, I'm not sure. It doesn't support the vane in that area, Whereas this, the vein is supported that whole way. So let's find out. Let's just, we're gonna leave it on a flat here. Align the pins, because there's pins that you need to align. And then stick it down. And then retract the arm. All right, well, it partially stuck. You can see it's actually lifting off that front edge. Get that arm out of the way. You can see the front edge isn't there. Yeah, that's not going to be consistent. So I must be doing it wrong. So I'm going to try differently on the next vein. But as you can see, this is really the way to go if you're going to prep a bunch of spin wings, because then you can fletch them up or get the stuff pre-taped much faster, a little bit more accurately in my opinion as well. You could lay the tape down on the arrow first and then stick the vein to it, but you can't do that with this jig. That's the purpose of this jig, is to try to make this as consistent and mechanical as possible. I'm sure it's just like everything else where it takes some playing with to get comfortable with it, but it's not super intuitive as far as how the placement works and all of that. And because I've got to still do this manual step here of sticking the vein tape on the veins, peeling it off, and then placing it in the jig, as I'm doing that, I'm touching the tape with my fingers, so it's removing some of the stickiness, the adhesive properties, because now I've got finger oils all over it. However, so I put it in the same place, at least I believe I did. The fletching clamp was able to swing down and clear the other fletching without an issue. And it did the same exact thing, where the front of the vein is not quite stuck down to the shaft, as you can see there. The middle and back section are definitely touching, but the front just doesn't seem to want to touch. That could be because of, you know, just the actual skinniness of spin wings themselves. So I didn't rotate the arrow. It says you still need 2 down this way. Then we'll do it again. So I'm working on peeling off that double-sided tape. Kind of get it positioned. Again, I'm not liking having to touch it. Get the pins aligned. Stick this thing down. See, I can't push with pressure to get that front. There we go. Maybe that was the trick. I had to hold the front and kind of push it down and over. There. Now it looks like the front is sticking. It at least has touched now. So the orientation of the vein this way, the offset, is now locked in place. So that was a big important detail there. And now that I got it rubbed down, I'm going to slide this back. We'll check the veins out in a second, but I first want to show you what was going on. These two arms need to be out like this as I'm bringing this top one down, but I'm going to get them out of the way just for the sake of showing you what I did. So the front of the vein was not sticking in this area, right? It was sticking really well through this section, but not quite in the front. And if you turn the thing over, you'll see there's 2 locator pins. There's 1 pin here and 1 pin here. And those pins locate where the clamp is relative to the arrow. So as you're swinging it down, you got to make sure that you have contact there where the pins are touching the side of the shaft, because then that keeps that line really consistent on the shaft and you don't have that variance like that. But what I had to do, for some reason, it was not going down all the way until I pushed this section over here in the front, and that somehow anchored the front a little bit better. Maybe it was something different on the clamp. I'm not sure what, but making sure as I brought this down that I was also pushing and holding this way as I was sticking everything down. And then when I lifted it up, the vane stuck much better. So I'm really happy about that. So we'll take this off and we'll take a look at the vanes. The consistency on the length, you know, as far as the position this way, is pretty close. This one's a little bit further forward than these two. First time using the jig, I might have bumped it on accident, so it's not a big deal. The spacing on the vane, or the vane's spacing on the shaft, look quite consistent from behind. You know, looking at it this way, it's very hard because I can't show you with the bench in the way. But the spacing is very consistent, at least to my eye. And the offset looks to be also very consistent, which is really nice. The offset is this angle here. Yeah, I wouldn't say there's really any offset. So they're fletching them on straight. So just keep that in mind, that the angle that this line is set right here, this jagged line, is straight relative to the shaft. It's not offset at any given angle, which maybe if this thing takes off in the future, Bohning will offer different offsets, because a lot of people that shoot spin wings, especially at a higher level, do different offsets for the same reason you change the amount of helical on a vane. And so this thing would be able to be tuned potentially with different, not clamps, I guess they're sort of clamps, they're at least guides. So different guides would allow you different offsets. Definitely something that I think would be a nice upgrade for this thing, in my opinion, because it would make a huge difference with your ability to do something consistent. Next, we'll test this thing on a Maxima Recurve RZ, which is a much fatter arrow. Get the pins aligned. They say to bring it to a consistent place on the back side of the shaft. It's just a lot of play there now that it's opened up. So you can see, because they're just pins, right? And so it's really critical to make sure the pins on the little jig things are aligned to the shaft, like so, as you're bringing it down. Very, very critical. All right. All right, so for X10s, you can slide it in all the way like I've got it here, where the actual spin wing is all the way in against that flat spot. But when I bring it down, it simply won't contact the shaft, so it won't leave it. So for fatter shafts, you have to have this vane more like this in this position, but then as you can see, this section of the vane isn't supported because of the relief cut for your fingers, maybe as a grip point. I'm really not sure why that's missing there. For me, that would be a very critical thing to have in place. So there, I got them lined up, but as you can hear, how many times did I touch that tape? It's got so many fingerprints on it now. Really think it's not going to have much in the way of adhesion anymore. And then there's something else that I'm noticing, I'm going to show you here in a second too, but let's get this thing stuck down. Should let go. Yep. So, you know, it works. It definitely places it on the shaft and it mounts it just fine. However, when I'm bringing this thing down, because of the play, now that we have a fairly large arrow, it's not even a big arrow, it's just a medium-sized arrow. So yes, there's play this way, but that's not a big deal because you have the pins, you know, to use to align the thing. But what else is a factor is this play, the twisting play, like that. So I can put it relatively consistent on this, on the fletching itself, or I mean the arrow, but I still have that much play with the pins touching the shaft because this thing has opened up enough because of the shaft itself. So it's leading me to believe that it'd be fairly inconsistent with fatter arrows, or at least more inconsistent than on an X10. They still work. It still puts it on there just fine if you have the fletching put in a manner that is touching the correct clamp area per se. So when you are fletching them, the X10, I was able to slide in all the way like so. And on this Maximum Recurve RZ, like I said, I had to pull it all the way out like it has in the picture, where it's flush to the outside of this line. But it's very difficult, as you can see. It's moving all over the place. So every time I'm touching it with my fingers, I'm, putting my oils or dirt or whatever onto the adhesive, and now the adhesive won't stick as well to the shaft. So, they say to slide the vane in first, put the tape on, peel the thing off, and then stick it. That would be ideal, but it moves too easily. So when you're putting the tape on, it's moving the vane. There's probably a way to do this a little bit more consistently, but it's not in the instructions. I didn't look at any videos or anything like that. I'm sure there's better examples out there on how to properly use this thing. And obviously there's different available spin wing type vanes or mylar type vanes. So different thicknesses would probably lock in here a little bit better. I can lock it in with squeezing it, but it's not as magical as I was hoping it would be. In my opinion, it's a whole lot easier to just do it by hand because, once you have lines on your arrow, these are old arrow wraps that Jason McKittrick, shout out to Jason if he's still out there somewhere shooting archery maybe. You can see these lines. There's a solid line in the middle, and then there's offsetted dotted lines for offsets left and right. And once you have your vanes pre-prepped like this, you just pop off the double-sided tape. Quick, stick it as on the reference in the back, get it in the angle in the front, and you're done with that fletching. The next. And I'm done. So I got 3 fletched really, really fast by hand. Still fairly consistent. I'm able to get the offset I want because I can angle it depending on which line I want to use. And I can get different drag effects, different spin effects, and various different characteristic changes that you can't necessarily get with something that doesn't have adjustable offsets. Also, this was a little bit faster to just fletch it by hand and a little bit less frustrating. However, I've probably fletched thousands and thousands of arrows like this by hand. I haven't in over a decade, but muscle memory still works really easy. Whereas this was a little clunky in my opinion. The play in it, not such a big deal when it's like this in the small diameter configuration, but as it goes up in diameter, which, these are the 7.5, which are probably way too big, but let's torture test this thing. Yeah, so you can see the play. Yeah, so this arrow's too big for this because the fletching arms are falling right out. And I'm sure that some people out there love this thing, but for me, this is just a little bit too clunky and it's not as accurate or consistent as I would have hoped. So by hand, compared to using this Bohning Spin Fletcher, I believe I can fletch more consistently. At least I believe I can, if I pay attention, of course. I also believe I can fletch faster. I also believe that I'm not touching it with my fingers, therefore it's going to stick a little bit better by hand because I don't have the fingerprints all over the double-sided tape. However, this thing does work. It does do its job, and I'm sure if I spent a lot of time on this, and I fletched a dozen arrows, by the end of the 10th arrow or 11th arrow, I'm sure I got this thing dialed in and can do it quite fast. But it's not a magical fix, and if you've been fletching arrows for the better part of your archery career by hand with fletchings and doing spin wings, then I don't know if I would even worry about this. Although the price point is very reasonable. It's only 30 bucks. And for a fletching jig, that's really, really cheap. So it might be worth it if you're looking to try something to see if it's a little more consistent or you genuinely struggle. I struggled like crazy fletching spin wings by hand in the beginning of my career. But by now, I can do it in my sleep with my eyes closed just because I've done so many of them. Still don't enjoy it, and I still prefer using glued-on fletchings like the Wave Pros. It's just, for me, a lot more consistent, and I don't really see a huge benefit to these now that we have some lightweight, larger profile vanes like the Wave Pros on the market. They definitely straighten out the arrows just as much as these spin wings, and in my opinion, in all my testing, I shoot just as tight, if not tighter groups as these, but I have the benefits of using a machine to put it on like a jig, and also it's way more durable. I can shoot them through the clicker and not have to replace them. They don't tear like these do either, although you can't repair them by hand in the field like you can these, so these do have a good point there too. So I'm sorry to say, I'm not really a huge fan of this Bohning Spin Fletcher fletching jig personally. There might be some people out there that love them. Maybe I did it wrong. Please comment below if I need some feedback there, or if you've got some feedback for me, because maybe I did it wrong. The instructions are very minimal. Yes, there is a QR code here that you might be able to scan and check out, it looks like, for videos on YouTube. I don't know if they have a particular YouTube video for this or not, but I definitely think that there is potential here, and like I said, I'm sure if I spent the time to fletch 10, 12 arrows, by the end of that, I'd be dialed in and I'd know a few tricks. I hope this video helped. I hope you got value out of it. If you wouldn't mind, please do hit the subscription button and the notification bell down below. Genuinely, that helps this channel out. And like I said, if you wouldn't mind, please check out the many different links down in the description below. Genuinely, that helps this channel out, and it allows me to buy this gear to give you those unbiased reviews that you're just not going to find anywhere else. And also, quick reminder, we're still in the middle of our giveaway on jkaminski.com or kaminskiarchery.com for the $4,000 WIAWIS package. And be sure to get entered before the end of this month, in November. That's when we will actually select the winner of the WIAWIS $4,000 package, including the Meta LX riser and your choice of limbs, a case, and all sorts of other gear. No purchase necessary. Full details down in the description below in case you're interested. And thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video.